Master Your Mindset Radio, episode 115.
Welcome to Master Your Mindset Radio, the show where we empower you to discover your true self before the world told you differently. Now for your host, Elizabeth Nader.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode, Master Your Mindset Radio. I took a few weeks off. I needed a break, but I'm so happy to be back with you. And what a perfect opportunity to come back and bring to you somebody who is incredibly inspiring, who I met last year when the pandemic started and found him online, brought him into a couple of things I was doing for clients. And I have to tell you what, this guy is something else and he has a story to tell you. Coach Lamonte Odums, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm well. I mean, all things considered, life is interesting, isn't it?
It really is. And, as we're coming into the holidays, I think that this is something that we all should truly be talking about right now because it's around this time that many people start to deal or they must confront their mental illness. And,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
and yeah, so that's why we're having this conversation and just to share a little bit of my story as well.
Well, let me tell everybody who you are first, because you are one of the most inspirational people I've heard speak. And that is an irony in this. And I've heard you say in an interview, I don't listen to my own words, but you, of all people, know how to motivate, inspire, know how to talk to someone and find where the limiting beliefs are, how to give them an idea and a path and a way forward. And in fact, this is what you do for a living, a speaker, a coach, a life strategist, media personality. You have a show called You Day down in Charlotte, and I think it's on some other stations. But you've been, in the media, on TV, inspiring people. The show You Day, inspiring, encouraging people, bringing them hope. And yet, this entire time, while that is your life's work, it is clearly your life's mission. It's what God put inside of you, and you are so good at it. Yet you were hiding pain and dealing with a past that it looks like, really was coming back to haunt you. And ultimately, it sounds like this past year you went through some struggles. So I want people to understand that this is somebody who knows the answers, but this is what life can be sometimes. So, Coach, I want you to take people through kind of what your background has been, some of the challenges you've seen, and what happened to you this year.
And Elizabeth, before I even do that, I literally right now just got a message from someone who watched an interview that I did. And I mean, this is what I just received right now. It just happened to come up on my phone, and this is from a father.
Mm.
I will not give his name, but he just lost his 15-year-old son to suicide on Saturday,
Oh,
and
wow.
he said something as I'm reading through this, and this just breaks my heart. He said, "I wish that I would have seen your interview sooner."
Oh,
And this is what the reality is that wow, that breaks my heart.
yeah.
15 years old, and I remember being that age and still dealing with a lot of the things that I've been dealing with now that I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And this mental illness thing is something that is real,
Yeah.
and it is something that so many Americans are dealing with. Not only Americans, but people worldwide are dealing with these things, and it is something that I've dealt with for a number of years. It relates back to my childhood, being sexually molested when I was at the age of 5, and that went on for about 5 years.
Mm.
And it spiraled into this angry teen who became an angry young adult, who became an angry man who was dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts and tendencies and waking up every day and the very first thing that you're thinking to yourself is today the day that
Wow.
I'll gather the courage to actually take my life.
Wow.
And this is something that I was dealing with for so many years, and it really came to um, a, a, a collision, so to speak, of me versus me
Mm,
this past summer. And I know that many people who follow me, they saw so many posts, and I was coming out of my shell, and I was telling people, hey, something is not right. And I've
yeah.
said this for years, that something wasn't right with me. I knew that I was dealing with things. It wasn't normal to be depressed all the time. It wasn't normal to think
Right.
of suicide all the time. It wasn't normal to think that you're not worthy. It's not normal to look in the mirror and hate the person that's looking back at you.
Right.
And these were things that I was dealing with for decades.
Mm,
And it came to a head this summer when I was in a parking garage writing a note to my wife and my children about to take my life. Now,
mm,
to give you a background, this is Mr. Motivation here. This
yeah.
is the guy that's on television screens. Right now, we're syndicated in multiple cities, and with you, Day, as you mentioned in the introduction there. And my mission and my job is to encourage and inspire people. But the thing is that these inspiring and motivating words were coming out of me, but they weren't benefiting me. They were
Mm,
benefiting other people because I disconnected from my own words because I knew that I had to release these things. My spirit just didn't believe what I was saying.
wow.
And I
Mm,
didn't believe that the things I was saying were intended for me. I felt that they were intended for other people. So when I wrote, I was writing, and as I was writing, I was saying to people, crying out, if someone could just say this to me, if someone trusted could say what I'm saying to you back to me, because if you say it, I'll believe it. If I
mm,
say it, I don't believe me, because of the vessel that has carried all of these words of wisdom. So
wow.
this was something that I finally got to a place that I said, you know what, I got to get the help, and I got to get these strategies down deep embedded inside of me that then I could believe. And as I am coming out of my dark shell, I'm going to bring people out of theirs and bring them into a place of light.
Well, you've been doing that even before the crisis this summer, and as you say, as a teen, you had the suicidal thoughts. Obviously, you hid them as best you could. What is it that allows you to have such wisdom and help? Because anyone who watches your teachings, and those listening right now to my audience, go find his stuff on the internet. I have a few things that we did together where I brought him into an audience, and I'm telling you, this guy knows what he's talking about. He inspires you. He connects the dots. He gives you wisdom. He brings in scripture. He gives you a sense of what God is saying. So, Coach, how do you really balance the fact that this is clearly a gift? Your words are great pearls of wisdom. They change lives. How is this not getting into your spirit? Is the wounding keeping it from changing you?
I believe that what we do, so many of us, Elizabeth, is that we build these walls.
Mm,
And we've built these walls to keep good wisdom and good knowledge and good understanding from reaching our spirits.
yeah,
So what I noticed in my own life is that I was able to wall up to prevent my own healing, but I was able to jump over the wall to help people find theirs.
mm,
So here I was locked within myself. I created a prison in my own mind, and I placed myself in there. And from the prison cell, I was able to scream out to help other people,
yeah,
and that's what I perfected doing. Because my mission, you cannot separate who God has purposed you to be and the person in the earth realm that you're battling as,
yeah,
because we're spiritual beings.
yeah,
And because we're spiritual beings, we have a spiritual assignment, but our spiritual assignment and who we are spiritually does not always match up to who we are naturally. Because spiritually, I have this call. That's the purpose of why I was created. But
right,
naturally, we're dealing with the elements of this world. We're dealing with our past. We're
right,
dealing with everyday events. We're dealing with our with situations that come to us that we don't find the courage or strength to deal with. So
mm,
then we're battered, and we find ourselves so torn down. But yet there's still a voice on the inside of me that is whispering and telling people, you don't have to be in the place where I am right now.
wow, wow. You
You
don't
don't
have
have
to be. Wow,
you don't have to be in the place where I am right now. You don't have to lock yourself in the prison as I am in the prison right now.
Wow.
And when you're able to finally find the strength to reach through the cell and to unlock the door and the bars and let yourself out, that then you can tap into a level of freedom that you don't always see is possible for you.
I have to ask you, when you're at the point where you're in the parking garage and you're having these thoughts, what do those thoughts sound like? And if you were to have a chance, like this guy who just texted you, which is heartbreaking, but if you had a chance to talk to his son, right before that moment, I want to understand because I've experienced it with friends that sadly we have lost to suicide. What are those thoughts, coach? And would there be anything that countered it? How did you pull yourself out of it? Because I think people that haven't struggled with this don't understand those thoughts that are going through your head that are bringing you to a point of literally wanting to end it. Help us understand that.
I remember when I was there and I was dealing with a lot of things. Number one, I was dealing with some things that were going on in my marriage, and I had really hurt my wife in some areas, and
Mm,
um, and then I know because this is one thing I can say is that a person who deals with mental illness, they pass that illness on to the people that are around them,
mm,
and they become shadows of your pain. When the light hits us, when the sunlight hits us, our shadow seems bigger than who we are.
mm,
But the shadow spreads further than where we are. So my
right.
shadow was touching areas and touching things that I wasn't able to truly touch. That I was in a sense touching, but I wasn't physically touching, if that makes sense. So my
Yeah.
shadow was crossing upon my family. It was crossing upon my wife and my children. It was crossing upon my team and crossing upon the works of my hands because of what I was dealing with. And I remember I was in the parking garage and I'm thinking about the people that I've hurt. I think about not feeling worthy. I'm
Mm,
thinking all these things, and one thing I remember is that as I was crying, I was in this deep place of tears. I kept saying, "Okay, okay."
mm,
I repeatedly said the word "okay." I would breathe and then say "okay." With each "okay," one "okay" meant I would be okay, and
right.
the other "okay" meant I had courage enough to do this now.
Oh my
So here I
gosh.
was wrestling between two mindsets.
Yeah.
One okay was like, okay, Lamont, we can pull ourselves out, we can get the help, we can continue going. The other okay was, okay, Lamont, you can do this, you can end your life, and you can whatever is on the other side of this life experience. Now you're ready to confront whatever it is. You're ready to see the Lord's face. You're ready to experience whatever comes next. And then the other thing is telling me, well, okay, things are going to be well. Get the help. There are more people that you need to help, but first you need to help yourself. What you've hurt, you can be repaired.
Yeah.
And these are the things that I was battling with. The Word of God is so true when He says that a double-minded man is unstable in all of
Yeah.
his ways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here I was an unstable person,
Mm,
unstable as I'm dealing with two things here, two mindsets. One is telling me to do it, and the other one is telling me to live.
wow.
And it was literally at that moment. It was June 27th, which was my mother's birthday, and
Mm,
it was literally at that moment that I got two phone calls. Got one from my wife and got one from my mother. My mother said to me, she said, "Hey, I want you to come to Texas, buy a one-way ticket, and separate yourself from everything." And when I got to Texas, I started working with this therapeutic group, and I got really connected, and really getting into a place with the Lord that help could be granted for me,
yeah.
and that is where this journey of healing and recovery started.
So that phone call from your mother is what just brought you out of that moment and you decided to go see her. Had she not called, had your wife not called, do you think you would have come out of that? What do you think may have happened?
I would have died.
Oh my gosh.
I would have
Wow.
died, and because I was listening to that okay,
Yeah. Right.
that okay was ringing louder. it was ringing louder. And we think about now, Elizabeth, so many people have asked, where did mental illness begin?
Yeah.
Where did it begin? And mental illness and being unstable in our thought realm started in the garden.
Yes.
When Adam was confronted with the things that he allowed to take place in the garden,
Yes.
the Lord told him that he would have to toil all the days of his life,
Right.
that he would have to toil the ground and the thorns. And now we see from that point, if you dive deep there in the Hebraic meaning of that entire scripture, of that entire story, he went into a mental anguish
Mm.
where he knew that what he once had, he no longer had access to anymore.
Yep.
He no longer had access to joy. He no
Right.
longer had access to freedom. He no longer had access to happiness and love. Everything had to become a work for him.
Mm.
And because he knew what he had before was what he no longer had, he went into a place of mental anguish where the thorns and the thistles were now pricking his hands when he had the ability to touch it and not be cut.
Yeah.
So now he has to toil with his hands. Now we fast forward to the last Adam and we look at what happened and what took place there. When the Roman soldiers were making fun of Jesus, they were putting him through a mental anguish.
That's
They were
right.
putting him through a place of depression. He was depressed on the
Yes.
cross. He was in a place of being lost.
Yes.
His identity was being torn away from him.
Yes.
And they did something. They did something that they did not know exactly what they were doing. When they took the thorn of the crown of thorns and they placed it upon his head, what they didn't know is that they were placing upon deliverance of mental illness at that moment. Because
Oh
what
my
Adam
gosh.
had to toil with in the ground, they put it on Jesus' head to take to the grave.
Oh
So
wow,
so
coach.
so now so now that we understand where this came from, and now we understand how to get rid of it. We're lost between what happened in the garden and what happened on the cross. We're lost there,
Wow.
and
Wow.
so many of us we lean towards the garden more than we lean towards the answer.
Yeah,
Even if we
right.
know where the answer lives, we have a difficulty getting there,
Wow. My
and
my
that's what
spirit.
I was experiencing.
Oh my gosh, my spirit is jumping as you say that. I've never heard it illustrated like that. And I guess what comes to mind, coach, is that so many of us in the church talk about physical healing and we talk about the cross as our place of physical healing, and we don't talk about mental healing. And we have this stigma that many people are working to against and trying to lift that in society. And I think while it's gotten better, there's a long way to go. But there is this stigma, and I don't think that the church really understands what you just said. And in fact, it's so powerful. And in many ways, mental illness is no different in terms of the need to be healed from it than a physical ailment, a cancer, a diabetes, anything else like that. Why the stigma? Why have we struggled so much, even the church, in being able to help people understand this, identify it, and bring it out of the dark corners?
Because people don't come forward because of shame, frustration, and also because of labels.
Yeah.
Now let's first talk about the shame. There have been certain events that have taken place in people's lives that lock them in a place of shame. We don't want to talk about many of the abuses or
Mm,
many of the decisions or many of the mistakes. We don't want to talk about those things because we know with shame comes judgment.
yeah.
And as we're living in that place of shame, we grow frustrated with ourselves. We grow frustrated with other people because we say, you just don't understand me. You don't
Mm,
understand what I've walked through. You don't understand what I've encountered in life. Because people who have never walked through it will never understand it.
of course.
So when a person says you don't understand me, what they're actually saying is that you don't understand me. They're telling the truth.
Yeah.
Because people who have never walked through something can never understand a person who's walking through something.
Right.
And then the last thing are the labels. We don't like to be labeled. We
No.
don't like to have labels attached to us. The church has taught us is that if you carry a label, you're not carrying faith. And that is not
Mm.
true.
Mm.
And we as the church, we have to stop treating people that way because
Yeah.
that's what keeps people from walking through the doors.
Right.
So when we look back, over all these years, if a person had something that was mentally going on, they were considered crazy,
Mm-hmm.
and then they were separated from society because you're crazy. Remember back in the late '80s and early '90s, we had that term called going postal
Right.
because you had people that would walk into their workplaces and they would start to turn guns on everyone, and
Mm.
and they would do all these traumatic things. It was only because they were dealing with a mental illness that had gone unrecognized, or people saw it but just classified them as being crazy
Right. Right.
and
Right.
never sat that person down and said, "Hey, check this out. How can we help you? What is
Right.
really going on?" And
Right.
and I'm an African American man, and I was actually talking to some people at a television station here in Charlotte, and we were having this candid conversation. And I said, if we were to look at so many of our young African American men that are going through all these situations where there's crime infested neighborhoods and they're getting involved with gangs and they're getting involved with drugs and all these other things, if we were actually to sit these young men down that 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 are that are causing so many issues in our society, if we sat them down, I guarantee you something happened in their childhood that they
Yeah.
never dealt with.
Yes.
And whatever you do not resolve internally will resolve itself externally.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
when they haven't resolved the pains that they're dealing with, we see the pains that they're dealing with.
Mm.
And this
Absolutely.
is so when we're able to have this candid conversation to sit people down and say, "Hey, check this out. I've walked through this, and I can see that there are things that you're walking through. Tell me your story."
Mm.
And then when they open up and start to share their story, then we can listen to them. And then we can see where their pain points are. And if
Yeah.
we can catch the pain points, we can actually apply healing balm to those areas. And if we can apply healing bombs to those areas, we can clean up our community. We can drop the rate of crime that's going on, and
Yeah.
we can really heal this land.
It's so true, and I think there's a cautionary tale in here, which is true with any illness. Any illness, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
start where it ends, right? So you get
That's
God
right.
gave us bodies and minds that give us clues and signs and warnings. So if we don't take care of something, if we have a wound on our finger and we don't take
Mm-hmm.
care of it and it festers and it becomes infected, eventually it can actually go up our arm into our heart and kill us. So
Right.
in the same way, what you're saying is everyone goes through some amount of pain in their childhood, but some people go through some stuff. Some people go through some things that, we don't understand why they have to be hurt like that as children. But if they don't deal with that pain, and even pain in adulthood, you go through a divorce, you go through a bankruptcy, you go through a death of someone close to you, any kind of pain that we go through is a wounding. But in this case, the wounding is in our spirit or even in our mind. And if we don't deal with it, it begins to take root. If we don't address it, it can begin to have a physical representation of that wounding. And the mind is the virtual aspect of the brain, but we know from brain scans that eventually if you don't deal with the negativity going on with your mind and the wounding that's there in those thoughts, it starts to change your brain and the way that your brain acts. And then now it's getting even more difficult for you. So this idea that we carry these woundings, especially from our childhood, do you feel like the woundings that you experienced as a young boy, it was that sort of that door that opened that allowed for you to get
Absolutely.
sort of start to slide into darkness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because pain pain happens, and what happens is this is that a door has opened somewhere in your life.
Yeah.
a door has opened somewhere in your life, and once the door opens, then anything can come in. And once it comes in, it joins forces with the first thing that came in through the door.
Mm.
So let's say for me, um, when the door of perversion opened, when I was sexually molested,
Right.
it opened up the door, and everything else that would cater and bow down to what I experienced as a child came right in. So
Mm.
shame, depression, perversion like pornography, all that stuff came right through the door with it.
Yep.
So then, and once it's in, it sits there and it creates a home within you.
Yeah.
And once it creates a home within you, then the result of the person you become is based off of the pain that you've experienced.
Yes.
And we are
Wow.
people that are walking around wounded. We're all wounded. We've all
Yes.
encountered something. Yeah, I did a U Day. I did a U Day segment on a scar that I had on my hand,
Mm.
and I got the scar on my hand. I was doing a friend of mine. He had started a construction company, and I worked alongside. This was probably about 20 years ago. I worked alongside with him, as he was starting this up. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was up on top of the roof, and as I was up there, I was doing shingles because he was doing a re, restructure or whatever you want to call it, renovation. I'm sorry. So he
Right.
was doing this renovation. And I was up on the roof, and I was putting on shingles, and one of the shingles slipped and it cut me. So as it cut me, I have this scar up to this day. Your scars will show an experience that happened to you, and
Yeah.
connected to the scar is a story.
Mm.
So once you see a scar, a person will go back in time and they will tell you how they got the scar.
Yeah.
So we have to start to look for scars in people, because
Mm.
the moment that we can recognize a scar, it opens up conversation.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
person will tell the story of how they got the scar. If we can listen to how a person got a scar, if we can listen to their story, we can help them in their story. I was going to say, I recently watched this documentary on Netflix about Aaron Hernandez.
Mm.
Now I'm a huge football fan, a huge New England Patriots fan. All
Yeah.
right, love my Patriots. And I remember when the story of Aaron Hernandez. Now I lived in Connecticut. Now I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I lived in Connecticut, and I remember him
Yeah.
playing high school football there,
Yep.
and he was all state. He was a fantastic football player who then had
Right.
the opportunity to go to Florida, and from Florida he was drafted into the NFL, where he was a New England Patriot tight end, and
Mm-hmm.
then all of these things started happening. And
Yep.
he was convicted of murdering this young man who was a rising football player and also a friend of his, or whatever the case may have been. But
Right.
as he ended up, he had a life sentence. He took his life in his cell. All right. So one of the things that the family, that the legal team went to his family after he passed, and they asked him, "Can we get his brain? Because
Mm.
we want to have his brain. We want to have his brain, dissected. We want to be able to see what was going on with him."
Yeah.
And the neurosurgeon and the investigator who investigated and went in and did this autopsy on his brain, discovered that he had such a high level of CTE
Mm.
that it was something that they had never seen for someone his age, and he was 27.
Amazing.
And they said something. They said that the area of the brain that it affected touched him in a place emotionally that he could not discern many of the actions he was doing.
Wow.
Now, let's go back into his life. He was sexually molested,
Yep.
and that put up walls that he built muscle around his pain, and no one knew it. So we in a sense, as I'm watching this, and I'm looking at this young man's life, and I'm thinking to myself, that's what so many of us do. We build these muscles around our pain. I'm okay. I'm all right. How are you doing today? I'm good. Knowing
Mm.
doggone well we're not good.
Right. Right.
How is life going? Oh, life is perfect. No, it's not. You're
No.
miserable. We
Right.
build these emotional muscles around our pain, and then the muscles will eventually close in on us, and then we're
Yeah.
locked in, and we're crying out to escape. And this is what happens with so many of us.
That documentary, I had forgotten that I watched it. I thank you for bringing that up because it's a tremendous thing to watch, and you're
Hmm.
also, confirming that eventually we do see changes in the brain over time, and more importantly, changes in the brain, even if it's through repeated injury,
Hmm.
will affect us. I mean, we have to recognize that, and I think, the other thing we do is not only build muscle around our pain, but we build a scaffolding of lies that we tell ourselves. And if we continue
Oh,
to
that's
live
good, Elizabeth.
right, and if
That's
we
good.
live and look through those lies, then we become lost eventually. So as you're sitting in that car, you're telling yourself lies. On the one hand, you've got almost in not in any way to belittle it, but you almost have the devil and the angel on the shoulders, right? That whole hope and no hope voice that you're hearing. One is telling you there's hope. One is telling you, nothing is worth doing this. We can turn this around. There's always hope. And the other one is telling you lies.
You know what? And to that point, Elizabeth, the longer you tell yourself lies, the longer you listen to a lie, the longer it becomes truth to you.
So true.
And what happens with lies, because we're triune beings, we're spirit, we're soul, and we're body.
Yep.
And how revelation that I got is that in your spirit is where you create these personal and spiritual laws that you live and govern by.
That's right.
Now, a person doesn't have to think about loving someone. It's something
Yeah.
that's automatic.
Yeah.
There are some things that are automatic that do not require our brains to function in that area.
Right.
So our souls, which are three dimensional, they're mind, emotions, and will. And then your spirit is the place where your laws live. That's where God has placed the laws that you live by to govern you in the earth realm. If
That's right.
I have convinced myself of a lie
Yep.
and I now believe it, what I do is that I go into a governmental legislative place and I change a spiritual law
That's
and
right.
I adopt a new law that I now govern myself by.
That's right.
So if I feel that, God says you're worthy, but I believe a lie for so long that I'm not worthy, what I've done is that I've replaced that law that you're worthy with the place that you're unworthy. So anyone that tries to come in and try to change that law, I won't accept it
Nope.
because it's a law within me that says I'm not worthy.
Yep.
So the longer we believe a lie, the longer it becomes a truth to us.
That's right. The longer you believe it and it's in your spirit and it becomes a stronghold, and you can say all day long in your mind, in your will, I'm going to change this. I'm going to feel this way about myself, but that's not what's in control, is it? It's that law
No.
written on your spirit. And I really think that what the enemy of our soul does from the moment we come into this world is attempt to use pain, attempt to use the fallen nature of man around us and the things that people do to hurt us. And everybody gets something of this in life. We don't escape it, but the enemy of our soul wants to use that to put you in a prison of that so that you literally change the laws written on your spirit. And this is why you can talk to somebody all day long to try to talk them out of a depression, try
Hmm.
to talk them out of these feelings of wanting to die, of these sense of no hope, and say to them, can't you see? But they can't. It's in it's spirit work, isn't it, coach? It's deep spirit work.
It is, and if we even look at the laws that are in our land, every law exists because there was an experience that brought that law forward.
Yeah.
So something happened, and because it happened, our legislative body, our governmental body said, you know what? This happened. To prevent this from happening again, we have to create a law.
Right.
So all laws are created off of experience. So
Yeah.
if you want to change a law that exists in someone's spirit, you have to go to the original experience, and that's where it's changed.
Oh, good.
So if a person is told that they're unworthy, all right, and they have now established that they believe to themselves, I'm unworthy. and now they've developed this law that says I'm unworthy. Okay, so we have to change that law. You go to
Yeah.
that person and you say, okay, so you believe that you're unworthy? Yes, I do.
Right.
Well, let's search it out. Let's
Yeah.
investigate. And
Yeah.
then as you go deeper and deeper and deeper to the root, then you can find out that they were told at a young age that they would never accomplish anything and they would
That's right.
never be able to do anything. And it was there that the law first developed. So if you
Yeah.
want to change a law, you got to go to the root. One quick story. You have to find the root. One quick story. We were living, as I said, we were living in Connecticut, and we had moved into this house, and I was in the backyard, and my mom, who was a real estate broker, we're standing back there, and there was this tree that was in the middle of the backyard. And all I kept thinking was, my kids won't be able to enjoy the backyard because this tree is right there in the middle. And
Mm.
I could not stand this tree. So I'm talking to my mom, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to chop the tree down myself. And I'm going to get somebody to come in and just take this thing out. And my mother said something. She says, you don't want to do it yourself. You want to have a professional come and do this.
Mhm.
She said, because if you can look, and as you can look, you can see the roots. They were above the ground and they were going under. And she said something. She said, the tree is smart enough to extend its roots to a source that will keep it alive.
Yeah.
And she said, unless you have a professional that does this, that tree's roots are possibly wrapped around your water pipes and your water system underground.
Wow.
And if you pull that tree up the wrong way, you can destroy your entire water pipe and your entire water system. And I'll
Look
never
at that.
forget how she said that. Whatever you see on the surface is rooted and fed something deep down within that person's soul and spirit that permits that thing to still have life.
Yeah.
So what we
Absolutely.
have to do is not only do we have to get to the root, but we have to get to the feeding source.
Yeah.
What is
Oh my
keeping
gosh.
that root alive? Why is
Mm.
that root still alive? What is keeping what you see on the surface alive deep within? We focus so much on symptom that we never get to cause.
Yeah.
We
Absolutely.
focus so much on what we see that we never get to what we don't see. The thing that's fueling what we do.
What we don't see is the thing that's fueling what we do. And, as people are listening to this, some people will say, well, I've never gotten to the point of really wanting to commit suicide, or I haven't been diagnosed with a bipolar or something or something. But here is the reality is that we all have the potential to go there. The reality is
Yes.
we all have to deal with this pain and these limiting beliefs because right now, as someone's listening to this, they may be looking in the mirror thinking, I will never succeed in anything, thinking I'm ugly, thinking that they're not worthy of love. Whatever those thoughts are that were built on something from childhood, often, and sometimes even when we're older, somebody in authority that we give authority to in our life that tells us a lie repeatedly and it becomes truth. So the point is that we need to catch this. The point is we need to challenge our thoughts. Just like Paul said, I have to die daily to my thoughts, right? I
Hmm.
have to deal with them daily because thoughts are things. They're real.
Yes.
And they become, like you said, that tree in the backyard. If you are not careful, they develop roots. And those roots, like you said, can go to a source that you're not even aware of. So here's what I want to do as we start to close, because I could listen to you all day. And I really want to encourage people to find you online at coachlamont.com. I don't know if people outside the areas where you're syndicated can watch, but you can tell them at the end. But here's the thing, two things I want to do. First, I want you to speak to the person who's married to, parent of, sibling of, friend of, somebody who's struggling the way that you struggled, coach, this summer, especially. I want you to speak to them because often they don't know what to do. And I believe I heard you talk at some point about your wife in another interview and how I think she has done an amazing job with this, but I want you to speak to that
Hmm.
because that's one
Yeah.
of the areas that we don't do a good job with. What do you do, coach, if someone you love is at that point?
I believe that so many people that have a loved one, they know at the core who that person really is and who that person can become. And I
Yeah.
think at times what we have to do is we have to separate the person from action. And we have to get to a place that we look at action and say, the actions that we see are rooted in pain that this person carries. And I would say number one, pray. You have
Yeah.
to keep that person in prayer. You have to pray for that person. Number two, encourage that person to seek out help, but do it in a way that is not judgmental, but in a way of to say to that person, you know what? I believe in you. I know that you are better than what you're walking through. And
Mm,
I want to walk this process with you so that you can find help, so that we can find help. And that's how you talk to someone. Sometimes when we see someone that is dealing with things and we don't understand, we become judgmental. And judgmental has a voice, judgmental has a tone. And when a
right.
person who is walking through mental illness hears a certain tone, it adds to their pain because that becomes the voice of their pain because they're already speaking out of the same tone
Yeah.
because they're already passing judgment on themselves. So it's the way that you speak to someone. It's the constant reminder of who they are, why you're in their lives. This is why I'm with you in the first place. This is the person that I've always seen. And incorporate you in the healing process. If you're
That's good.
able to say, you know what, as you get help, I'm going to get help too. We'll get help together and we'll lock arms and we will do this together,
I love
which was
that.
one of the things that my wife said to me. And one of the things that continuously, is able to push me forward. And throughout this entire process and this entire pain, I created something called Solical Therapy Coaching.
Mm,
And it's just a way of helping people to walk through what they're challenged through. The thing that I tell people all the time is that, I want to, as I have found breakthrough, you have to find breakthrough from the things that are breaking you.
yes.
And
Good.
once you're able to forge and come out of your pain, I promise you, things on the other side are going to be so much brighter. You
Yeah.
look really quickly, you look at the life of Lazarus. Now, Jesus knew that he could have gotten there in time, but a
Right.
story had to be told.
Yeah.
A story had to be told. And the moment that Jesus comes on the scene and people are blaming Jesus for what took place, if you had only been here, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But Jesus, the very first thing that he did is that he stood there and he gathered people and said, remove the stone. We have to get the stone out of the way.
Oh, that's good.
We have to remove the stone. Once the stone was removed, he called his name specifically Lazarus, because if he would have said, just come forward, anything dead would have came forward.
Oh, wow.
But he called specifically into the cave that was holding his body. He called him. He said, Lazarus, come forward. Lazarus came forward, mummified,
Mm,
wrapped in grave clothes. But it was very specific. He said he had something that was covering his face.
mm,
So many of us can have a stone removed, but we can still be wrapped in the grave's clothes. There is a process. Removing the stone is just the first step. Telling the telling the grave clothes to be removed from him was the second step. The
right.
third step was being able to free his eyes so that he could see again.
Wow.
So what we have to do is that we have to help people to remove the stone. And as they're coming forth, take off the garments that have enclosed them and kept them captive for so many years. The things that we've worn. We've
Yeah.
worn depression. We've worn suicide. We've
Right.
worn anxiety. We've worn all these things. Now let's strip ourselves of the things that have clothed us. And now let's forge forward and we can walk in freedom. So
Wow.
this is what we must do right now.
What an amazing way to look at Lazarus. I mean, you just bring it every time. I just you make my spirit jump. What can I say? I mean, it's so full of hope and such a great way for people to understand what they're dealing with and understand that there is hope on the other side. And we don't heal from anything without really giving ourselves over to God who wants us healed, right? And that's part of it. We have to be willing to do that. But you are a great example of how there is hope and also an example of how the gifts of God are irrevocable because even in your darkest times, He was still using you. He was still using you to help others. And now, of course, that's been amplified. I want to just read something from your website because it is the week of Thanksgiving and we focus on gratitude more this week than we should really do it all the time, but we focus on it a lot this week. I know you have a lot to be grateful for. I'm grateful that you're with us. I'm grateful that your voice is out there. But on your website, you say this. You're grateful for what you've overcome. This is what you list: overcame childhood sexual abuse, overcame anxiety and depression, overcame lack and negative self belief, overcame self sabotaging behaviors and mindsets, overcame absence of a father and a male role model, overcame suicide attempts and suicidal thoughts syndrome, overcame lack of direction and homelessness. Wow, coach, listen, I'm just amazed at the ministry God's given you. Just one last word to whoever's listening, whatever's on your heart.
I would say this: if you are a person that is walking through darkness, and you are a person that is experiencing some type of mental anguish, some type of mental illness, you've known for so long that something is not right. The way you process things, the way you see the world, your perception. Now is the time for you to make the investment in you. Find
Mm,
someone that can help you. There is no shame in help. There is
yeah,
no shame in talking to the right person and saying, "This is what I'm walking through. This is what's going on with me." We have voices. We have these voices. Now is the time to use them, but use your voice first to help you.
yeah,
Use your voice first to talk to someone and say, "This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm walking through." And it's that first step right there that opens up the door to a lasting effect of change, a lasting effect of healing, a
yeah.
lasting effect of freedom. This is your moment. Take advantage of it and live.
And live. Absolutely. I love it. It's beautiful. How can people hear more of you if they're not in the areas you're syndicated, your website? Just tell everybody what the best avenues to find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Coach Lamont, and Coach and Lamont is spelled Lamonte. You can find me there, CoachLamont.com. That's my website. You can find me there. And we have a suite of things that we're going to be releasing in 2022 that I'm excited about. I'm excited about these things now.
Mm,
And before I wasn't, but now I'm excited about these things. So we have a suite of things that we're going to be launching, and a lot of cool resources and programming, a lot of things. But get connected with me, and I'm looking forward to conversation. The thing is, Elizabeth, is now this has become my platform,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
whatever you walk through, understand that that becomes your platform to help other people. He
That's right.
only allows you to walk through things that he knows he's going to pull you out so that you
That's
can
right.
then go forth to help other people that are walking through the same thing.
That's right. That's right.
So,
And
yeah,
that's the reason that's the whole reason that he
exactly.
allows it and that it can give him glory, and that should give everyone hope that no matter how dark it seems, there's a reason for it, and you can use it to help other people and you will come out the other side.
Exactly. That's the reason why the majority of his disciples were fishermen, because he
Mm.
knew they knew how to fish.
Another great pearl of wisdom. Come on. I mean, I just, I love talking to you. Honestly, you're incredible. I love your unique view. It always gives me something else to think about. I just appreciate you so much, and I'm so glad that you're telling your story. I just am excited to bring you to my audience. I'm excited to watch all the things that you're doing. I know there are going to be great things, and just continue to be blessed and overcome. You are an inspiration. So, Coach Lamont, thank you so much for joining me and
Thank
for
you.
blessing my audience.
I appreciate you greatly. And everyone have a happy and safe holiday season.
Amen. Absolutely. And to my audience, guys, have a great one this week. We will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Master Your Mindset Radio. Before you go, please visit elizabethnader.com to learn more about the Mindset Maven and how she is guiding high performers to map their mindset to their message so they can effectively express who they are and why their ideas should win. Looking forward to seeing you online.